Hi, everyone, and welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. It is always a pleasure to start off my week this way because I love answering your questions. And really, it is true that the questions you bring have been incredibly formative in how I think about these things. It's not just my questions, but it's your questions. So thank you for joining me here tonight or today, depending on where you are. And look forward to diving in. I have a couple of announcements to make. The seminars, the live seminars begin next week. That's Monday, May 9th. Those are going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern this time around. You can always get them on recording if you are not able to make that time work. I do try to move the times around so it'll work for different people. And we're working on that delivery system so that more and more people can come and get the benefit of them. Again, I just wanted to say what the seminars are for is really to take all of the mind-body information that you have out there, or if you're a novice and just starting out, to orient you to the whole thing and get you a sense of the whole picture of the whole system. The general idea here is that we've got to be able to answer all of your questions to all of your satisfactions, and it has to make sense. And that's what the seminars are designed to do. So there are 8 sessions. They're 75 minutes long each. And through the course of that 2-week course, Monday through Thursday, 8 different sessions, you should have a very comprehensive view of how to think about mind-body issues through the column system, why this system can work for many of you. And I get this question a lot. People ask me, well, can this work for me even if I've been the kind of person who's been through a lot of mind-body stuff and understands a lot of the mind-body world? It's actually especially good for people like that because I take those ideas and show why they all actually make sense, why we're all saying a lot of the same things, but there's a way to centrally organize it so that it all makes sense together. And then, of course, the memberships that follow, they're going very, very well. And currently, if you get the seminars, you can get a discount on the membership group. So take a look on our website. It's www.crushingdoubt.org, and you can check that out. But there is also going to be a link to get into the system directly. I'm going to get you that link later today. I'm waiting to get that sent to me, and I will let you know shortly. In the meantime, on the website, you can also take a very short assessment that will determine whether you have a mind-body issue or not, in all likelihood. It also can identify which column is probably your predominant column, so check that out on the website as well. And lastly, we have some changes coming up, which I've been mentioning, but just wanted to make sure that you guys knew where to find the new information for the podcast. New podcast information is now going to be coming out on Spotify for audio. It's a membership, $5.99 a month. We kept it as affordable as it could be, but this allows us to channel new information out there in a system that anybody who wants it can get. And the video version is going to continue coming out on YouTube for the time being, but eventually will be on our own network called Sapphire Network. That's something you can check out on our Instagram site. It's actually on all social media, but Instagram seems to be the one that has caught fire so far. So check out the Sapphire Network. That's where you'll be able to actually get a lifetime membership to the podcast. It'll be relatively affordable. So enough with the announcements, though. Now let's get to your questions. That's what we're here to do. We have a lot of people actually who joined on Instagram, so I just want to say hi to them. Catherine Toomer is here. Retrospections Vintage. I know that is Justine. I remember. Lucy Oden. We've got Scotty saying hello. Good to see you here, as always. Jeannie Cohen Coaching has joined. And apparently Scotty knows her. They're saying hi to each other. Good to see you both here. And Carrie Norling has joined us as well. Thanks for joining us, Carrie. Okay, we have a question coming in off of YouTube. It is Regine Korn. She says, Dan, can you elaborate more about the third part of the core narrative? Thank you. Okay, now, people may be tuning in really for the first time here, so I actually am going to orient people to the whole core narrative idea. The idea of the core narrative is to tell the story of your suffering self. We all have multiple parts of who we are, but your suffering self is, what have you been through? What's all the trauma, the emotional trauma about? Sometimes people come to me and they say, well, I haven't had emotional trauma. I just, don't know how to get rid of this. That's sometimes the kind of thing where we work on just in the doubt column, and maybe you don't have a big emotional thing, but a lot of people do. And for those that do, when we're working in the power column, that's where the core narrative comes into play. The core narrative is what I call or how I've defined as a 3-sentence narrative that tells about who you are in your core suffering self. In other words, what happened to you. That's the first sentence. The second sentence is, how did it impact you? How did it play out in your life and impact you in specific ways. And then thirdly, and this is the part Regine is asking for, is what are you going to do to live differently? So the third sentence, or the third part, because sometimes people write multiple sentences, is really about, now that you know your trauma really, really well, which is kind of what happens as you go through the core narrative, if it's done well, and you may need my help with that, the groups are a great place for that, then you need to figure out, well, how am I going to live differently? How am I going to live more in alignment with myself? So the nature of Regine's question, I think, is basically, well, how do I construct this? Now, Regine, I know you've worked on your first and second sentences, and in fact, I think we've even worked on the third, but it sounds like we need to flesh it out even more. And the idea is, once you see how you've suffered, then you have a lot of decisions to make. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I actually mean it as a good thing. Now is the time where you can actually decide, I didn't like being mistreated in this way, or I didn't like being in this position. And what I found is I made a decision, truly just a decision, that I was not going to live that way anymore, that I was going to make even little decisions based in such a way that would be more aligned with myself, that wouldn't get me stuck in the same suffering kind of situation as before. So, Regine, I can elaborate on it, especially in specific, when we talk about specific issues, and I'll take you through mine, just as an example. So in my core narrative, which, by the way, I want to say, I didn't just invent the core narrative and then start using it. I actually started using it without realizing what I was doing. Then I looked back at it and thought, oh, look what I just did. And it came through some suffering, through some trauma. Well, as I was suffering through a certain amount of trauma, and I'm happy to answer what specifically that was, because I'm an open book about these things, I came to the idea that, oh, you know what? A lot of my core narrative was about the fact that even though I felt that I was good, I didn't feel that I was valid. I felt that I was actually lesser than other people for various reasons. Part of that was not having a father when I was first growing up. It impacted me a lot. Some of the responses that I got in the world continued to feed that idea of validity. So when we're talking about the third part of my core narrative, really we're talking about, how am I going to live in such a way that I will never subject myself to feeling invalid ever again? So the first two sentences actually inform us about what it is we're supposed to be working on here. How are we actually going to live differently? For me, a big part of that was about validity. There's lots of ways we can talk about all kinds of different people and experiences, but that is an example of something that I had to look at and decide, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Now, in specific, Regine, part of what I talked about in my own core narrative when I made the rough draft was something along the lines of, I will never give my power away to other people. I will never judge myself as invalid anymore. I will be fiercely in my own corner and live my life. And that doesn't mean in a way where I'm like walking all over other people, but I'm going to make sure that I am taken care of at my core. A lot of times people don't even know what's happening or experience any impact in that. But within me, I'm making adjustments all the time that align myself with essentially the opposite of what the initial core narrative sentences are talking about. Basically, I'm consistently telling myself, this is funny. Do you guys remember in the SNL skit, Stuart Smalley, that Al Franken did? I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. That came from somewhere. And in a way, that is part of what we're saying in the core narrative. But there is one difference. He didn't believe it. And you could see that he didn't believe it. That was part of the joke. In the core narrative, you actually do come to believe it. And it's by seeing in very stark terms how you've suffered and truly believing, I don't deserve that. It's a kind of form of self-empathy. Regine, let me know if that answered your question. It was long-winded, but kind of important that we got to all of those details. Dorisa is saying hi on YouTube. Good to see you here, Dorisa. And Chuck Brown Productions, that is Terry, has joined us. Good to see you here. Catherine Toomer has a question coming in. And Scotty has a shout out to Core Narrative with an exclamation point. Thank you, Scotty. Okay, Catherine says, hi, Dr. Dan. I've joined the membership group starting Friday. I'm excited. Counting on you to save my life. Just kidding. Nevertheless, very excited. Okay, so I actually wanted to say something important about that. We just talked about this in the groups today. In the groups today, we talked about how a lot of us are always waiting for people to save us. And I actually have it's a two-pronged message about this. Both are important. One is this: with the right information, there are people who can save you. That doesn't mean you're not going to do some of the work yourself and that you don't save yourself. And it also doesn't mean you're dependent on someone else. But you can depend on people if they have the right information. And that's what I've tried to do, is to gather the right information to be able to bring it to you. So the information certainly can save you. And I got this information, by the way, through my body. The wisdom of my body told me this information. And so we will save you together. The other side of the coin is that you are going to learn your system within my system so that you aren't dependent on even me about that. When I first read Dr. Sarno, I clung to that book like it was my life. And in a lot of ways it was. He was the only one who made me feel safe. And I remember I reached out to him because I wanted to talk to him directly, because he was the point of safety. And I had a very brief conversation with him, about 2 minutes. And at the time I thought, I didn't get what I needed there, because what he said is, well, just work on it. And again, I first thought, oh God, this is a dead end. Even Dr. Sarno can't help me. But then I realized that part of what he was saying is that he believed in me. He didn't say it in that way, but I think that's kind of what he was conveying. And so we will learn that in the groups. But Catherine, I will also help very, very directly. In the groups, we go through the moments, and people will say, okay, well, here's this moment. How do I understand it? What do I do? And we go through how to understand the moments in the columns and what to do about it. So the membership groups are great. They're even better if you have been through the seminars, I find, but it's absolutely not necessary. Either way, I get you the information you need. There's only 3 columns. They operate a certain way. Once you know what you're doing with it, it's pretty easy to know which column is the predominant column, what's the main task of the column, and then we get to the specifics, and that's what those moments are in the group. So, Catherine, very excited to have you on board. All right, looks like we have time for a preloaded question, which sometimes is rare, so we'll take advantage. Let's bring one up now. Is it coming up? Not yet. Well, I have it right here, so I'm going to read it. Here it is. This is from Mark. Do people get obsessive about what the powerful move is? Is there more than one powerful move? Okay, great question. And Mark's actually doing my training with me, so he'll be somebody who can help people along the way, which is part of what I'm excited about. Is we are expanding our territory and our ability to help people in a number of ways. I've been building these things out. But Mark's question is an important one, and it's one of these examples where I didn't think about it because, my language makes sense to me. But when I say it out loud, a lot of times your questions hone what it is that I'm saying. And so this is one of those examples. He asked me this, and I thought this is a good question to bring to the group. So I think that, yes, I think a lot of people obsess about what the powerful move is. And the answer is there is many more than one powerful move. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of powerful moves, all different kinds. And I have these kinds of conversations with people frequently where they say, well, I want to be powerful, but I can't because this, that, and the other thing. A lot of times there are constraints in real life, and they're saying, I can't make any kind of decision that's going to be particularly powerful here. What I like to show people is that's not true. There's always something powerful to do. I was just talking to somebody today. They were saying, well, I'm in a situation, I can't change it. And here's what I said to them. I said, okay, you can't change this one, but can you start thinking about what you can do so that you don't get into this spot ever again? That's a powerful move that you can do right there, even while you're in the thick of not being able to do anything. So there's always a powerful move. And, the reason Mark asked this is I say, what's the powerful move? I don't mean what's the powerful move. I never mean that. I never mean that there's one way to go about things. Your job is to collect the things that work for you. And notice, things is plural. There are many things that can work for you. I want you to go through the different columns and sort through what you need in each. The columns have specific ideas that point you in the direction that can help you understand mind-body issues in a certain light. Each column represents a certain thing. With respect to what Mark's asking, he's asking about the power column, because I say, what's the powerful move here if you're out of power? Well, it could be so many varied things. And it can be completely opposite of each other, even in the same person. Sometimes the powerful move, when you're confronted with somebody who's being aggressive, for example, is to say nothing. Sometimes the powerful move is to push back in some way. And it's going to depend on your moment. I say this many, many times, and I will say it many, many times again, because it's what needs to happen. To have an effective mind-body system, whatever it is, you will have to understand that it's moment to moment. You got to have your rules of thumb, and that's where I really built the columns out of, is I realized I got to deal with all these different moments. How am I going to do it? I needed to understand each moment. So many, many powerful moves. We can talk more about it. Follow up on that, Mark, or anybody else. Okay, it looks like we have time for another preloaded question. All right, let me pull it up in case it's not coming up fast. This one is from Sylvia. Sylvia said, my recent experience with your model, Dan, is that emotions column work is helpful with onset of pain. But when doubt takes off, that's when I get stuck, when the symptoms persist for days. I think it's hard to believe it's consistently acute because it feels like the same thing. Maybe also from the medical system where they say migraines, which are her primary symptom, last 4 to 72 hours. And mine usually don't last more than 72. Okay, so this question has a lot of important things embedded in it, as is often the case. So, first of all, what she's saying is referring to, as I mentioned, her primary symptom being a migraine, but she references consistently acute. And I realize some of you may be tuning in either for the first time or maybe not sure what that is. That is my way of talking about chronicity. The reason I call chronicity consistently acute is that it's a very important. Are there some questions coming in from Instagram? Yeah, okay. That's weird. It wasn't scrolling. Thank you for that reminder. Okay, I'll get to the questions on Instagram in a second. Consistently acute is very important to talk about because it looks exactly the same as chronic. Chronic means unbroken in time. Consistently acute also suggests unbroken in time. It just means something different. Consistently acute means it's second by second by second. It's always the same. So it always looks the same. But if you're looking at it that way, it's totally different in terms of what you do. If something is chronic, it suggests there's nothing that can be done about it, especially when it's attached to a kind of structural idea. Well, then maybe there's nothing you can do about it if the structure is truly the cause. What we found is it usually is not. Consistently acute, it means it's happening over and over, and that means it's about a belief system. So that's a totally different thing to do. Now, what Sylvia is describing is that there's so many things that are feeding her system and getting her the idea that it's not going to change because that's the way it is. And that's the feedback loop, right? It makes perfect sense. You're going to believe what's happening over and over. But what I've found is most useful here is that when you challenge these beliefs, that's when you start to see little changes potentially. Maybe you won't at first, but with enough conversation, what happens is your conscious brain starts to expose the doubt underneath. And then it can't help but shift. And it's like a poker tell. It just gives itself away. Oh, now it's shifted a little bit. So, Sylvia, I know we've already done this, but we could actually shrink that window. If you hadn't been told 4 to 72 hours, let's say you had been told 4 to 24 hours, I can pretty much guarantee you that's probably how long they would have lasted. They're almost giving you a playbook without realizing it. They don't mean to be. And that's, what people tend to think. And so we've got this groupthink going on. The more you challenge it, the more you can get to a place where things start to shift. So I understand that if it's looking the same all the time, you're going to doubt it. Just remember, it can be the same for 2 reasons. One, because there's some kind of structural issue underneath, which usually is not the case, and doctors usually catch, almost always. Or 2, your belief system hasn't changed. In the case of what we're talking about, Sylvia, your belief system has changed quite a bit over time, and so have your symptoms. And that is a sign that we know exactly what we're talking about and that we can extend this even further. Okay, question coming in from Justine. After completing your wonderful seminars, thank you for the shout out, I have had some better days symptom-wise, but I have also had intense ones. I know that doubt on the run can make symptoms move, but what if your original symptom is the one that goes up and down? Still doubt. Yes, that is still doubt. The fact is, doubt is actually pretty hard to get entirely rid of. As I say, doubt will keep on coming and coming and coming. And here's the thing. It's going to work in whatever way works on you. So this is interesting, Justine, because what you're saying is voicing a doubt right here, which is, okay, this is working, things are on the run, but it's my original symptom that's going up and down. So is it still doubt? And guess what? That's doubt right there, trying to get you to get confused. All it wants to do is keep you off balance so it can stay in the same place. Hammer away at the doubt. And, I think, particularly if you come to the groups, I can help you with those moments, Justine. And we'll work on it one way or another, and we can get you help, including with my trained colleagues if you can't come to the groups. But the basic gist is we've got to hammer away at every doubt. I say this many, many times. Observe, articulate, and counter. Observing means to recognize the doubt, and that's in a way the step we're on here. You're having a doubt. You're getting better, but you're doubting, can I get fully better? Remember, doubt, it just means unsure. So you're weighing those things. I want to get that articulated very specifically. What is it you're doubting? So you're saying symptom, the original symptom is the one that goes up and down. Essentially what you're saying is, if the original symptom is still going up and down, is that still doubt? I'm going to answer the question, but then we have to make sure it answers it to your satisfaction. Yes, that is the case. It is simply doubt. If you're having, it doesn't matter whether it's the original symptom or a later symptom where the symptom imperative takes over, doubt will work wherever it can. I think here, it knows that the original symptom is, kind of a place to work. By the way, the original symptom usually has a ton of doubt built into it because you have a history kind of similar to what Sylvia was saying. You have a history of experience with it. Now, Justine says evening groups would help me too, being in Australia. I know. As a person who is trying to work worldwide here, I'm trying to manage all the different time zones. I'll keep working on that, Justine, and we'll see what we can do. Let me know if that answers your question, though. Absolutely, it's still doubt. You're showing huge signs of progress. The seminars are already helping. Keep after the doubt, and I'll help you with that. Okay, Terry says, speaking of the groups, is there any chance for evening time? Oh, I see. That's what Justine was responding to. Like after work, I just can't make the during the workday times. I need to give that some thought, Terry. It's a bit hard on my schedule, unfortunately, but I will give it some thought and see what I can make happen. Okay, I'll get back to you on that. Get back to everybody on that. All right, Catherine Toomer says, I'm working on the third sentence of the core narrative, just like Regine was saying. Is it first a general statement of what to change and then coming up with action steps to get more concrete and realistic about making it happen? Yes, that is exactly what it is, Catherine. The third sentence of your core narrative isn't really very specific at all. It is developing a general roadmap of the new way you want to live. You don't have to have any idea how you're going to do it. The specifics come later. The core narrative lays out the general blueprint. It's almost like if somebody said, I'm going to create a system that's going to fix the healthcare, community and get healthcare for everybody, let's say. That's very general, but it is at least a goal. So the third sentence is aspirational. What is it you're hoping to do? And it's the kind of underpinning of everything you're going to resolve. Then when you work in the power column, you use it to build out specifics. So yes, you get more concrete, more realistic. You look at specific moment-to-moment experiences. This is a big part of what we do in the groups. We look at moment-to-moment experience and what's getting under people's skin, what's holding people back. How do we make those breakthroughs? Okay, so you got the right idea, Catherine. All right, Justine said, yes, okay, that's what I thought. Thank you. All right. Yes, agree. Heaps of doubt built into it. Makes sense. Yeah, she's referring again to the original symptom. A lot of times that original symptom really, it it can stick around. It's interesting. My original symptom that brought TMS to my attention was back pain. And that one did go away very quickly. But I think part of that was because Dr. Sarno talked specifically about my symptom. And a lot of times people understandably complain, oh, my symptoms off the beaten path, or it's not what Sarno talked about. They all work the same, every single one. The question is how much doubt is built into it. Terry says, thanks, really appreciate it, as I really want to join, but, well, you know. Okay, well, I will work on, I may think about doing that. I need to check with the current group members and see if it works for them. If not, maybe I need to build in a fourth option, but I'll work at it. I want to help everybody as much as I can. Carrie says, maybe someone you've trained can do later hours. That definitely is at the very least possible, but I do know a lot of times people specifically want to hear from me, so we're going to keep building out these systems. It's amazing how much goes into thinking about these systems and building them out. I first went on the Hope for Healing podcast on Curable with John Strax in 2019, and the demand was very, very strong, and I needed to build out lots of things. So I've worked at it. We're at the tail end of building out the main stuff, but I'll keep at it. All right. We have Karen Isaacs has joined us. Good to see you, Karen. She said, just had second booster, literally. I'm going to assume I'll be fine with no side effects like all the other times. Okay. I like what you said here, Karen, for multiple reasons. One of them is it doesn't harm you to assume you're going to be fine, you know, because even if you did have symptoms, they're not going to be that bad. But people say to me, oh, you always assume it's mind body. And I say to them, that's not because I'm being unrealistic or a zealot about it. It's because it's actually useful. There's no reason to let doubt in the door there. There's just no reason to do it. You know, even if you did have some symptoms, they're not going to be serious. So you might as well go full guns blazing at doubt and say, it's entirely possible I'm going to have nothing here. So that's the way I'd go about it. Karen, I think you're doing the right thing. That's great. And let us know how it goes. But I have every expectation that since the mind-body system is so strong, I would expect you will have no symptoms. Okay, we have a question coming in from Facebook. Lima Mohamd says, hi, doctor, are sinuses and tonsil stones a mind-body syndrome? Interesting. Struggling to get rid of. Nothing structurally wrong. All right. So that's interesting. I've never heard the term tonsil stones. So Lima, definitely let me know what is meant by that. Maybe it's just swollen tonsils. But here's what I will say. Sinuses are very, very easily affected by mind-body issues. I actually think the whole body is. Head to toe. If the body can do it for one reason, it can do it for a mind-body reason. And that's the way you want to think about it. No symptom is different. So I would say think about it that way. If you've already found that there's nothing structurally wrong, well, that's incredibly important information. That's why we go to doctors, to make sure to rule out anything that is potentially life-threatening or we're just not sure what was going on. Doctors are very, very good at catching the major things. What they're not as good at, and I don't mean this critically, but just kind of factually, they don't understand the mind-body experience and how it can be impacting things. I hear from a lot of pretty aware doctors about this issue, but they don't understand the specifics. So one of the things that I need to build out, Patty Martin said we need to clone you. That would be great. I would love to do that. Of course, I might find it annoying in other ways. But I do think that I have a lot of work to do, and we as a community have a lot of work to do. But one of the things I need to do is to connect with doctors and help get them not only aware of these issues, but skilled, with some things that they can do and understand. So if doctors have already cleared you that there's nothing structurally wrong, you can go ahead with sinuses, with swelling in the tonsil areas or throat or whatever. You can go ahead and assume that's mind body. If doctors have cleared you of anything, particularly if you've seen one or even especially two doctors or more, you're fine. This is mind body, and I want you to push on that. The way to do this, Lima, is to look at the doubts. Look at the doubts specifically and figure out what's going on that is making you wonder about this. So actually, I would say let's do a follow-up question even today if you want. let's ask this question. What part of you doesn't believe that either the sinuses or tonsils or whatever it is isn't mind body? Maybe you're pretty sure and you just want the reassurance, and that's totally fine. Or maybe you really have some doubts and we need to get those raised. Okay, Karen Isaac says, that answer was doubly reassuring, Dr. Dan. I'm addicted to reassurance, especially from therapists, doctors, anyone who will give it to me. I know why, having been witness to some not good things. It's very, very common for people, just in general, to need reassurance. And honestly, it's one of the main things that I needed. When I read Sarno, one of the great things about it was a book. I could go right back to it over and over, which is one of the reasons I got to get my book out to you, and it's very, very close to done. But we all need reassurance. What I like to do is build in the ability to start reassuring the self at a very, very confident level. And the columns to me do that because they give me the information. Again, I use my columns all the time in my own life, every day, multiple times a day, because they give me a sense of what's happening. They give me confidence. And the more I look at them, the more confidence I get because the more they make sense and the more I make sense of it all. And then the power column builds it out even more. So I'm glad that answer was reassuring, Karen. I'm happy to keep bringing reassurance. And what I think is actually happening is slowly but surely, you're not only getting the reassurance you need, which you always needed, understandably, but you're starting to be able to do it even more for yourself and starting to be more and more confident. I see it happening in your comments, and we will keep it up. All right, Catherine Toomer says, so attempt at third core narrative statement. Here we go. I will shift my focus and motivation from fear to love. That is, in place of fear, guilt, and hypervigilance, about avoiding wrong and avoiding negative. I love that start. That's a great start. So actually, I did a podcast on how love is the antidote to fear. And it really is true. I even, I think I shared a story at the time that I talked about this last in the Q&A. It was about my youngest daughter, and she was feeling afraid of something. And I said, do you remember that when you think about how much I love you, it makes you not afraid? And she settled right down and it was fine. Now, that doesn't always work specifically, but I do think that love does wipe out fear. And self-love goes a hugely long way. And that's what the power column is really about. All right. That's great, Catherine. You're well on your way, and let's keep building that out. Wish I Could Sleep has joined. I wonder what your symptom is. I'm happy to help you with that. Insomnia, that can be a big mind-body issue. I've certainly had my share of it at times, but I found ways around it. We can watch about it. We can figure out about it. Sorry, I started reading the next question, which was from Justine. She said, just watching this Q&A has brought some pain down. So that's reassurance and more proof about doubt. Thank you. That moment right here with me and Justine, that shows you what this is all about. You know, it's simply in the process of talking about it and being with somebody who is very, very, very confident that the symptoms tend to go down. Now, I'm sure there are people out there who say, but it didn't make my symptoms go down. All that is doubt. That's all it is. It doesn't mean that your symptoms won't go down. But for those of you whose doubt was quelled, the symptoms do go down. And that is proof. And it continues to be proof. So remember these moments, guys, because every time these things happen and your symptoms go down, it's proof that it works. At first, maybe it's proof just for other people as you're listening to it. With the right understanding, it can happen for you. If it happens even just a little bit, you start to get some belief. And then it keeps going and going and going. All right, I got a good LOL from Joseph. And then he said, Dr. Dan, when someone can't rest due to anxiety, I think he was laughing at me observing that the insomnia sufferer had the name that was revealing it. So he says, Dr. Dan, when someone can't rest due to anxiety, do you recommend they train their body to rest or instead yield to the anxiety and go exercise or be productive or something? Okay, love this question. What I would say is this, and this is an answer to this specific question, but it's also an answer to these kinds of questions in general. I like to have built into my system, I would say maybe 3 different options. I don't know, my columns, there's 3 columns. I tend to work in 3s, it seems. But I I like to have different solutions for different moments. So when I have insomnia, there's a couple of things that I do. One, I sometimes go be productive or exercise or whatever, just like Joseph is saying. In other words, sometimes I go with the energy. I say, okay, you're telling me I don't want to go to bed right now. Fine. And often my conscious mind tells me whether that's true, because if it's going in circles about a particular thing, that's a sign that I need to go ahead and do that. There are other times, though, where where I'm not focused on anything particular. And sometimes I need to remind myself of what I call enjoying the bed, which is simply saying, I don't need to fall asleep. I take the heat off of falling asleep and more focus on and I guess this is training my body to rest in the way that you're talking about it, Joseph. I get myself to just enjoy where I am. And that does relax me. So I guess I would say I mostly go in two different directions, but there is a third. And that is sometimes I need to use the emotions column and think this is an onset of a symptom. I need to figure out what's going on underneath it. And if I can pinpoint it and get exactly to what it is, then I might go to sleep right away. Really interesting. So I'd say three different options. One, investigate your emotional life. Two, go with the energy. And three, train to relax in some way, whether it's, recognizing I got to enjoy the bed or whatever kind of, or maybe meditating, something that relaxes. Generally speaking, it's one of those three. Joseph, let me know if that makes sense to you. Okay. Catherine was continuing her sentence, and I answered it in the middle. Sorry, Catherine. So I'm going to go back and read what she wrote to bring it all together. She said, I will shift, this is the third sentence in the core narrative. I will shift my focus and motivation from fear to love. That is, in place of fear, guilt, and hypervigilance about avoiding wrong and avoiding negative consequence. I will focus on having a loving, ready, generous attitude toward myself and those in my environment. Clearly, that statement needs action steps to have any chance of happening. So, Catherine, you're right. That, I think, is really where the rubber meets the road. You're first going to lay out the plan. Don't worry about it when you're writing out the core narrative. You don't need to have action steps. There's no way you would. It's interesting how the action steps can sometimes come from laying out the goal. A lot of times when the goal isn't laid out, you don't have a chance of getting the specifics right. So actually, this is a key function of my overall system. In my overall system, I say many, many times, you want to get at the broad picture first. And that's what I did with the columns. The columns are a broad picture of ideas about what's happening at a given moment in the mind-body field. I don't mean mind-body field like the people working out there. I mean in the field of your mind. So I look at the broad part first. That's how to look at this. That's a great third sentence. It's fantastic. Now, the only question, there's two questions I have. I was going to say only, but there are two. One is, what specifically are we going to enact to have a chance of happening, just like you said? So that's one aspect. The other aspect that I want to get to, though, is do you believe what you're saying? A lot of times we say things and, I have people say to me, oh, well, I just say I'm safe, but it's not working. And I say to them, do you believe it? And they say, no. And I'm like, well, that's why it's not working. So let's look at, why do you not feel safe? Let's get to that. In other words, talking actually works. It depends on what kind of talking is happening, but talking can work. The right kind of talk can work. The right kind of information can work. And laying out the broad picture is part of how we then work with the specifics. We work it through that way. So I like what you said there, Catherine, and we're on our way. Okay, Joseph said, great answer. I'm glad that was good for you, Joseph. Generally speaking, I find there's really only a handful of options most of the time. I don't mean that as limiting. I mean that as good. They're broad, they're important, they're good, and they address the problem. So I said this in the group today. One of the reasons I like my columns, out of many, is that I don't underestimate the nature of the problem. It's moment to moment. It can be wide and varying, but I also don't overcomplicate it. I have ways of kind of shrinking it down, and that's kind of what I did right there. Now, Patty said, can you slip out of power and not know why? Or do you need to figure it out? So people slip out of power and they don't know why all the time. In fact, I would say more often than not, that is what happens. It's not usually totally clear why. But first of all, one way of measuring whether you are in power or not is, are you feeling good or not? That's simply the definition of power. Do you feel good or not? If you don't, you slipped out of power somehow. Now, the second question is, or do you need to figure it out? Sometimes just recognizing, oh, I slipped out of power can allow you to return to power in general, where you can just think, okay, well, I can be powerful again. I don't need to figure it out. In fact, that happened to me recently. I had a moment where I said something that I wished I hadn't said, and then I felt out of power, and I didn't ever figure out why I said what I said. I didn't ever address what needed to happen. It was simply recognizing that I was out of power that got me back into it. So some of the time you don't need to find out why. But it's similar to the emotions column. Sometimes you can recognize the general idea and it makes the symptom go away. If it doesn't make the symptom go away, then you delve deeper. So I would say the same thing is true with power, Patty. If you feel like you've slipped out of power and you realize it, and then that fixes the situation, then you probably don't need to delve any deeper. But if you still feel out of power, then I'd get specific. Patty, let me know if that makes sense. All right. Carrie Nordling says, yes, definitely love, especially self-compassion trumps fear. Absolutely. And then Catherine Toomer said, I loved your podcast on the power of love. I'm glad you loved it, Catherine. It's really interesting because I don't even remember what I said, actually. You know, I believe these things that I say, and I take the time to write them and stuff, but I say so much that sometimes I don't remember where I said what. I know it fits with what I think, though, and I'm glad you loved it. Thanks for the feedback. Okay, Joseph said, oh, wait, hold on. Karen has the next thing. Karen says, when I'm looking for reassurance, like always, I'm in a vulnerable state like now, and then I cry like now, feeling weepy, but I always am before my birthday this Wednesday. But that's another story. Well, happy birthday, Karen. But, I do want to say birthdays can be a very big deal, especially for people who are made to feel not so valid. My birthday has been a big deal for me for multiple reasons, and I totally understand. What I want you to do, though, is fitting with what we're talking about. Be kind to yourself. You are allowed to be an emotional being. I was saying to my own therapist recently that I simultaneously feel in many ways better than ever and on the verge of tears a lot of the time. We got a pandemic. We got some serious things going on in the world, as always, but maybe in some ways more than usual. We are all embedded in personal struggles of our own. As we get older, that whole idea of mortality and meaning pushes on us. We got a lot going on. So cut yourself some slack and take your body at its word about what you need, and it will guide you where you need to go. Okay, Joseph said, Dr. Dan, do you find that when people stop repressing their emotions, low self-esteem thoughts start popping up? I have made such great progress in the emotions column and awareness of what's going on, and all of a sudden I have these inferiority feelings. Yes, you nailed it, Joseph. I mean, I can't say it any better based on what you just said. So I would say this. Basically, try to expect that. When you make progress in the emotions column or you make progress in the power column, you will get to some realizations that do bring up things like inferiority feelings or vulnerability at a greater level. And maybe that's part of what's happening for you too, Karen. I remember this, Karen. Karen said, my birth mom was severely depressed when pregnant with me, then took her own life when I was 2. My sadness feels chemical. So I would agree with you on one hand, Karen, but I actually want to say, and I can relate to this because my father died when I was 6 weeks old, so I know what you're talking about. But it is chemical in a way, but it's not purely chemical. It's emotional chemical, meaning all that chemistry comes from a built-in emotional life. And the reason I say it this way is you're not doomed to this. If you think of it as only chemical, then you could feel really stuck with it. And I just want to tell you that as you come to accept yourself more in that power column sort of way, those chemicals don't need to continue in that way. You deserve freedom from that. So thank you for sharing that. And I remember your story. It's a moving story. I can relate to it. And our hearts go out to you. We're with you. You got a good community here. Patty says, good to know. Thanks, Dan, about slipping out of power and why and whether to dig into it. And Joseph, let me know if I answered your question, but it really is the case that you will discover a lot of things as you go. All right, a couple of last questions off of Instagram, and then we got to wrap up here. Scotty says, observation. Went to see a theater performance. The actor in the play spoke autobiographically about a pain experience. The moment he spoke of pain, I could feel a collective sigh in the audience. Witnessed people shifting their body position in their seat and felt an uneasiness in some of the subtle groans. Really interesting. So incredible that when pain is spoken about, it can literally have other people's own pain arise. Absolutely. And then Scotty says, I imagine that some of the shifting in seats from people were unconscious as well. I think so. But, you know, one of the things, this I can totally relate to, Scotty, one of the things I had to get used to in doing the work that I do, it doesn't really happen so much anymore because I do it so much. But when I started doing this, I found that talking about symptoms with other people would activate my symptoms. It would, and you know why? It's because it would bring up doubt. Because I was having to be sure for other people, and I had doubts. And then I had doubts about having doubt. And it's part of why I really love this work is it's my way of living. And it makes it really easy to keep fighting doubt all the time because I do it every day, not just for me, but for all of you. So it makes it really easy on me. And I appreciate that about you guys. But it really is true that when people talk about this unconsciously, it's like we all know. When it's more than we like, and like we all know. We do all know. The unconscious knows all. We know exactly what this is. And that is why when I talk about these things, I think it either rings true to people or they have a big response in the opposite direction, which is still ringing true. Okay, Joseph says I answered his question. I'm glad to hear it. All right. Carrie Nordling says, and we'll wrap up here, when I had birthday parties as a child, I hid, especially if the camera came out under the table I went. Still kind of feel the same. Hold on. Plus my happy birthday. I think she's saying she just wants people to wish her happy birthday and not make a big deal. She was talking about pictures. Okay. Andre 3000 has joined us. Good to see you here, my friend. Thank you for joining us. And Scotty says, thank you to the question. So I think that I answered his question as well. Guys, it has been a pleasure. There's so many great questions and I'm always learning. And I learn from your questions. And you know what's funny? I even learn from my answers. It's pretty funny because as I start to think things through, I'm like, oh, that's how this fits in. And which is not to say that I'm learning on the fly about most things. I've answered a lot of these questions enough that I really know what I'm talking about. But I keep expanding. And a lot of that is thanks to you guys. So there is a link for the seminar that I'm actually going to copy. And I'm going to put in the chat. This is on YouTube. I don't know how to put this on Instagram, so I'm just going to read it. It's crushingdoubt.clickfunnels.com / crushing-doubt-seminar-signup. Wow, that's a little confusing. Sorry about that. If you go to the website and you just go to the seminar link, you'll find it there. That's probably even easier. But the seminars really are a great jumping off point. So I just want to wrap up in saying, again, we start next week. Every batch, it's like I get a group of people and they come together. It's a very exciting and fun thing we do together that can help you to feel a lot of hope that you can get better. It's just about the information. You don't need anything else. The information is that good. So please do come join me. Thank you so much for watching. I will be here as usual next Monday, same time every week. It's 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'm working on the book. It's almost done. Looking to get it out in the summer or late fall at the very latest. And I can't wait. Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Great questions as always. Keep it up, and I'll see you next week.